Hi everybody and welcome to episode 12 of Mrs. Mummypenny Talks with Ridley Writes. Welcome back, or hello if you're a new listener. This week we are going to be talking about a subject that is quite an important one to both of us, I think, and to a lot of women. We're going to be talking about reinvention. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to see where that leads to personal experience and people we know and interviews and stuff we've read about. But we want to start off by, well, first of all, we need to start off by talking about how we are, and we also want to touch a little bit on our body image episode from a couple of weeks ago and some of the comments we've got on social media, because I think it's really important to talk about some of the things people have been saying, because it was such an emotive episode. But yes, Beth, how are you? How's your week been?
I'm tired, actually. Let's just start there. But on the back of, we were talking last week about being busy women and rest and productivity. And on the back of that conversation, I can report that I have had 2 nights running of 8 hours sleep, last night and the night before, which is quite something, and probably the most sleep I've had in a 48-hour period since the last time I was ill. So that's exciting. However, my body just wants more. So to be honest, I'd like to be napping right now. Sorry, no.
Yeah. Do you think though, because I know we were messaging during the week, I've been feeling really tired this week. Like how much, so it's the 24th of June, my mum's birthday. And also 21st of June was summer solstice. And I just keep reading stuff about it being full of like energy, but it hasn't been like that at all for me. I've just felt really tired.
Well, you see, I have a different take on this, because I'm a great believer that, yeah, absolutely, summer solstice, it makes tons of sense. This is a high energy time of the year. There's more sunlight, obviously, on the 21st of June than there is at any other point of the year. And we've all been really active. We are animals, we are part of nature, and we've all been incredibly active up to this point. I think that high energy is actually quite exhausting, particularly if you think about how we live our lives, which doesn't tend to be in tune with the seasons. So it sort of makes sense to me that there's a lot of energy and there's a real drive, energetic drive, but that actually a repercussion of that is that we're exhausted, because it's been, half a year of increasingly high energy. And so I think, I know personally, I'm ready for the waning half of the year. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah. And I had quite a hectic weekend, went up to Manchester. First time I've had a proper good look around Manchester. Like I've been up there, I don't know. Did I go up there to visit a university? Probably. I've been up there to visit friends, but yeah, just had a really nice 24 hours with the boys up there for football, but just made a weekend of it. And the people are so friendly, like it really is. So I know we're from Cornwall where people are friendly, but when you leave a big city like London where people aren't very friendly, and go up to somewhere like Manchester, it was just so cool. So yeah, that was nice, but just so tiring. Like I booked a cheap hotel to save money, but what you get when you book a cheap hotel is not a very comfortable bed. So a bit of a false economy, and we ended up, there was 3 of us, so it was a room with 3 beds, but we ended up all sleeping in the same bed because my littlest son decided he didn't want to sleep in the bed by himself. So yeah, that carries on and on. Still have a child in my bed every now and again.
I think there's another thing about tiredness that I've read a little bit about, which is this post-lockdown tiredness, because we're all suddenly doing lots more than we were. And that's having an impact. And even just the because you get tired from excess stimulation, not just actually physically what you're doing, and there are so many more things we can do, and I think the levels of stimulation have gone up significantly, so I think that's also causing collective consciously tiredness.
Agree, but yeah,
anyway, tiredness aside,
Kindness aside, should we flick to body image? And I'm
Yeah.
just logging into my phone to get to some. So I posted a picture on Instagram a couple of weeks ago, Mrs. Mummypenny UK on Instagram, if you're not already following me, which was it was two pictures side by side. Go to my Instagram profile and have a look. So there's a picture of me. First pic was me June 4 years ago, super skinny, and I was easily a size 10 for two, and I can look at it now, I can actually think I'm too thin. And it was bloody hard work and unsustainable. It was so much hard work to get that. Anyway, and I've compared it to a picture of me now where I am 3 sizes bigger. Yeah. I don't know how much I weigh. And it had a huge response, lots and lots of likes and lots of comments. And I'm not going to read any names. This resonates with me so much. I look forward to listening to your podcast. What's wonderful is that even though you might feel low now, to me you look fabulous in both photos, and believe me, I totally relate to negative body image thoughts, as I too have suffered from it all my life. The fact that your life is a happier one now is the most important thing. So it's interesting what other people see in a picture that you can't quite see yourself. Somebody saying you look hot in both pictures, Lynn. Thank you. To that girl we went to school with. Somebody else, I spend a lot of time avoiding photos and mirrors and feel bad that I do. So that's double shame. I can't blame anyone but myself, as I know my food, drink faults and choose not to change. You've hit the nail on the head when you said it was unsustainable. So it's a daily struggle to sustain, or it's a change of mindset to letting go and embracing who you are, and who you are is not based on what you look like. I too have put on weight, menopause rated. I wanted to maintain and improve fitness, but getting back to the same I was 5 years ago, forget it. As we get older, let's face it, it is harder. Another person, as for body image, I'm working on the struggle too. I think it's better to strive for neutrality over positivity. I won't always like what I see in the mirror, but I can make peace with it. Also, there's way more to life than what we weigh. So I'm trying to show my body gratitude for all the things it does for me. That's a really nice comment for that.
It's a nice way of thinking about it, isn't it?
Yeah, body neutrality. And I actually think that works quite well for me, because there are times when I can look at myself and think, yeah, I look good, I look all right. And there are other times I can look at myself and not like it. So I suppose as long as you're balanced, then...
Yeah, absolutely.
Even the most beautifulest people in the world, they are not looking at, well, they're probably in the same mindset, actually.
They are. 100%. Yeah, it's interesting. I remember an interview with Patrick Stewart, the actor famous for being Jean-Luc Picard on Star Trek, amongst other things. And a comment that his wife said to him to help him keep things in perspective when things were going really bad and people were really criticizing him. And she said, look, you've just got to remember, this is all absolute bullshit. And then she said, but when people are praising you and saying that you're the best thing since sliced bread, you've got to remember this is all absolute bullshit. And I think that's a really interesting way of kind of looking at things, that actually both the praise and the criticism are irrelevant, basically. You know, what we are is what we are. And there's a more kind of inherent truth than what the external world sees and how they respond, I think. I had a couple of really interesting ones that I want to share in addition to the sort of things that you said. So I posted a picture also on Instagram of myself quite recently in a very large sort of dungarees dress that somebody had taken a picture of me from behind. And when I saw the picture, my first reaction was kind of horror, that I felt I looked huge. And I've always been a person who's been quite slender, and that's always been something that's been commented on and complimented by other people. So it's very much kind of part of my identity. So it was a bit of a shock to see this image. And I wouldn't have posted it if we hadn't have been talking about it. So I explained I've put on a few pounds since lockdown, and said that, you know, I wasn't feeling good about that. I wasn't feeling good about the fact that as a feminist, I was suddenly feeling like I should be losing weight. Even though I don't subscribe to that idea that we should, or I don't consciously subscribe to that ideal of the thin is everything. But somebody responded on the feed and said, interestingly, I felt the same when I was thinking of getting my hair cut short. It took me months of indecision to actually get the courage to do it. I was worried I'd look too masculine because I dressed very tomboyish. I was worried that other people, particularly men, wouldn't think I was attractive. What the actual F? I'm gay, and my self-worth shouldn't be based on what I think others are thinking. In the end, it was so liberating getting it cut, because it was like, fuck you to those stupid thoughts that were all in my head. I think that's really kind of fascinating, just how deep seated in our psyche this stuff is. And somebody else said that the image and the comment resonate. She said, I've always been the slim one too, and previously have lost my baby weight very quickly. For some reason, it's taking a lot longer this time round, and I'm internally berating myself, even though I fundamentally don't agree with that. So, you know, again, lots there about this real contradiction between what we believe in our kind of grown-up rational minds and the stuff that's kind of layered there. Somewhat beneath the surface. So,
no, really.
I'm also, for anybody who is interested in looking at this subject more, I think I mentioned it the last time as well, but I'm reading Fat as a Feminist Issue by Susie Orbach. It was originally published in 1978, and she's, you know, updated the introduction to it. But actually the book itself is absolutely fascinating, and it really is it really sort of challenges you to think differently about not just what fat is, but also how our bodies might be using it as a way of unconsciously trying to protect us, or to do something positive for the situation we find ourselves in our lives. And it's and for our relationship with food, I think there's so much in that book. She's I think she was a therapist, or she certainly helped people through group therapy on compulsive eating and the idea of fatness. And I thoroughly recommend the book. I haven't finished it yet, but the stuff that she talks about is absolutely fascinating. So, cool. Anyway, today is all about reinvention, which I guess is also to some extent about how we look. And I know this was something that is a topic that you really wanted us to talk about. And I really wanted to ask you, why? What is it about this subject that you're really keen to delve into?
So the thought of talking about this came to me whilst I was listening to a podcast. It was an interview with Ruby Wax, who she's like an adopted Brit, isn't she? She's an American, but she's always been here. But she, it was an interview on the Midpoint podcast. Highly, highly recommend that podcast for if you're a woman over the age of 40. It's almost like similar to what we talk about. They just talk about, you know, with stuff for women and all the different things that come along as we go through life. But Ruby Wax was cancelled when she was around the age of 50. So she had huge TV programs. She was like the Louis Theroux of her time. And then she very famously talks about how he came along and sort of stole all of her TV shows from her. But she massively reinvented herself. She's now like a scholar, and she's done all this academia work. She's heavily involved in sort of mental health, and she's got all these incredible support groups for everybody. But yeah, she's now just incredibly well educated and has written books, and she's totally reinvented herself, but like at the age of 50. I mean, but she was and it just sort of rang true to me that we as women, we have huge life events that happen to us that almost force us into reinventing ourselves. and they can be all different kinds of events. But thinking about my life, having a baby, reinventing your career, changing your body shape, changing how you look, even changing what you wear. I just feel like it's just a constant like reinvention of my life every few years. And I look at other people around me, and they like, I know that you have certainly reinvented yourself several times in your life, but it's like whenever a big sort of life event comes along and hits us, we have to like evolve and reinvent. Now, is that, and I don't think that men have to or even do it that many times, even at all, being very general with that comment there. But yeah, I just thought it's a really interesting topic to explore. Thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And a comment I just want to make, which is a sidestep one, is about Ruby Wax and the TV show being cancelled at 50. And there is another, a future podcast on what happens as women age. We suddenly become invisible and taken out, in fact, of the visible sphere, which I think also affects both body image and our sense of self. But that's an aside. And I think she's a great, I think what she's done is fantastic. I think she's a great role model. And I think this idea of reinventing ourselves, yes, you're right. I would certainly say I've reinvented myself a few times. I was doing a little bit of research, as we often do before these conversations. And there's some research that shows that it's actually quite vital to your health and happiness to undertake this activity of reinvention. And studies have shown that a midlife career shift, for instance, can improve brain cognition, overall well-being, and even longevity. So there are actually some really kind of physically and mentally healthy reasons for doing it. And I think you also touched on this idea of reinvention is often something that happens at key points in your life. And certainly one of the ones I would talk about would be my many name changes as a very active way of reinventing myself. So as a child, I was always called Becky. And so most people who call me Becky will have known me pre me turning 21. And that was the name that I was called by my family, and therefore all my friends. I was only ever called Rebecca, really, I think, if I was in trouble. So that was the sort of the serious name. And when I was 21, I had this real sense of like my name losing my real name, which is Rebecca. And so I took a decision that when I left university and went to Oxford University to do the PGCE, I introduced myself to everybody as Rebecca. And so everybody that knows me from 21 and that period in my life would know me as Rebecca. And that rang true right up until my divorce and my mum dying. And so in my early 30s, when I got more heavily involved in theatre work and also moved to Bristol, I renamed myself Bex, spelt B-E-X. And
I missed that one.
and so I was Bex for a really long time, and the people, well, not for a really long time, actually, for quite a short period of time. Lots of people that knew me from that period that I first came to Bristol will still call me Bex and still write it in that way. And then and then when I went to work for the university press, there was already a Beck there. So in order to re-establish myself as other, I renamed myself Rebecca again. The whole thing gets very confusing, but generally speaking, I can date all my friends from different times they call me. Funnily enough, I think the name I am most comfortable with and the one that I like the most is Rebecca. However, I've always worried because it's the long form, and I always worry that it's a bit standoffish.
Really?
And that I might come across as frosty and unfriendly. Do you think?
Yeah. I can't call you Rebecca. I just can't.
You
It's
did
not,
for a while. You did for a while.
I think because you told me to. I remember that point where you recategorized yourself, but not recategorized, reinvented yourself as Rebecca, and I was like, oh, I better go with it then if she wants it. But no, I'm most.
Funnily enough, I'm pretty sure really early on, I remember when we were at school, when we were in 1H2, I remember you calling me Rebecca, and I actually remember you telling me that you didn't think that Becky suited me.
Your memory is just incredible. Yeah, yeah. No, I just call you back now.
Yeah.
But well, that's amazing. You've got a name where you can do that. Can't do much with
I
the
know.
name, can you, Lynn?
I know. And I've done the same thing to Amy. Called her Amy. I mean, at best you can call her Ames. It seems a bit crazy to shorten Amy to Ames.
Yeah, but I bet people will do it. Yeah.
Anyway,
So
it's more than names, but that has been one of the ways that I've indicated my reinvention.
Yeah, well, I consider reinvention a little bit as, or you can almost recategorize it as running away, where I feel like, I don't know if I've mentioned this before on the podcast before, but I really feel like when I have traumatic things happen in my life, I run away from them. And then you can literally reinvent yourself as a brand new person, can't you? So university was a bit of an example of that. I mean, I was always going to go to university, but I made sure I went to university far away from where I lived. And I didn't know anybody that was going to the same university. And I was just desperate to get away from now a place that we crave, but I was desperate to get away from Penzance because I was that girl whose mum had died, and that girl who'd maybe not done sensible things with her life after her mum had died. There's a bit of an emotional reaction to that death. Read into that whatever you may, but I slept with too many people. But yeah, so I wanted to reinvent myself just to wipe the slate clean and just have that brand new life. I suppose I've done the same with jobs. I've ran away from jobs where they've got too difficult, or things have I've just not been comfortable, or I've got really bored, or I've had a falling out with somebody. I've run away from jobs. And I wonder whether, I mean, divorce is, I mean, there's also having children. I'm not too sure I reinvented myself too much after having children, but I would have thought a lot of people have, because they, in some ways, lose a lot of their, overnight you go from a person having not many responsibilities to suddenly having a child or children dependent on you. But
Just at one point,
you need to unplug. But I think, yeah, no, the children one is an interesting one.
Yeah, I remember when I was confiding in a friend of mine that Dave and I were going to try for a family, and she was a mum of two, and she said, oh, one of the wonderful things about becoming a mum is that you don't have to keep reinventing yourself all the time. And I remember that really clearly, and being quite surprised about her saying it, but it always sort of stuck with me, this sense of I'm not sure that I didn't feel that I'd necessarily had the reinvention fatigue, perhaps, that she was feeling. But it's an interesting one. You do take on an identity when you become a mum, and it can become an all-encompassing identity, which is quite comfortable, and you don't have to define yourself as anything else. I suppose that's the key thing.
Yeah, and I maybe always fought against that a little bit. I was always very conscious that I didn't want to be known as being
So and so's mum.
Yeah. Like, I'm Lynn. I have a career. I have all this other stuff. Yes, I have children. That's just a part of my life. So I think I've always sort of fought against it. But divorce is almost like the classic sort of time to reinvent yourselves. And what I'm finding at the moment, which is really interesting, so my divorce all happened through lockdown. I think I got my decree absolute May of last year. I missed that anniversary. That's a bit annoying. Oh, anyway, so yeah, I haven't really been able to, go out there with a flourish and have this wonderful new life. But what I am finding now is I'm just questioning all my kind of core beliefs about particularly about what I would look for in a partner. And because I've always had this this thing that this is nothing to do with reinvention at all, but I've always just had this image of this person I was looking for who was a certain aesthetic look, height, social standing. I've got this tick list of all these perfect things in a person I'm looking for, and therefore I would disregard people that don't fit that mold. But actually, life, you can't be so sort of hard and fast about that, because like you can't, and this isn't just based on like who I might be seeing at the moment or not, but I just think be open to different things, because you just can't look for that exact. So I'm just trying to say that I'm trying to address some of my real core beliefs and desires and whatever, and just actually questioning, no, is that right? Do you really need to be with that person as a partner? Do you really need to be friends with those kinds of people? Do you really need to earn that kind of money, or do you need to have those material? I'm just questioning everything, and I don't know whether that's just part of midlife or whether it is all sort of linked to the divorce, because essentially I have been forced into that reinvention, and it's almost like the perfect time to do it, isn't it? Even like when it comes down to what the clothes I wear, like I love like flouncing around in sort of floaty dresses, and like you do as well, like what we used to do when we were teenagers. So I've started buying all of that kind of stuff again, and I just feel lovely when I walk around in my floaty dresses, and yeah, so it feels really nice.
I think there's some really interesting things popping up here. So I think the first thing that you talked about, in fact there's three strands to this, isn't there? There's the reinventions we do when we're younger, when we're effectively finding ourselves and defining ourselves, and I think there is something about defining ourselves away from what has been before. So that sense that you have of running away, and I know I used to have that when I was younger, that I used to feel like I cut off what had gone before. So I used to feel like I used to cut off friendship groups, even that there was a very definite kind of like, no, I'm not that person. I don't, that doesn't fit me anymore. And it's interesting because we talk about running away, and we talk about running away as a negative thing, and we're seeing it in a very negative sense. But actually there's a lot of, before you were able to say, yes, I am this, I think we have to say, no, I am not that. And there's a great, wonderful sort of sense of freedom and release at being able to move to a new area, move to a new job, change something very specific about ourselves, to be able to say, I'm not that, and to create the space to embrace what we might be. So I think there's that defining ourselves in the first half of our lives element. There's then what happens to your self-definition as a mother, and that may or may not be about a positive reinvention. And then there's this third element about divorce, and I think reinvention after divorce is a very specific kind of reinvention, because I think in any kind of partnership, as cliched as this is going to sound, but to become one, and I don't mean that in a lovey-dovey soppy way, I mean it as in your lives become so heavily intertwined and invested. I remember somebody talking about the fact that what happens when you go into a relationship is that your world becomes beige because you can't agree on colours. And so rather than having the colours that you really want, perhaps as a woman, maybe you really want that floral wallpaper in the sitting room, your husband hates it. It's got flipping flamingos on it. I don't want to look at flamingos when I'm watching the footy. You know, all of those kind of stereotypes, forgive me for them, but they're there and they exist. But so rather than have what you really like, you settle on this kind of beige, indistinct grey colour that doesn't offend anybody, but doesn't also speak to either person's personality. Yeah. So then when you divorce, there's suddenly this wonderful explosion of going, well, actually, who am I? Who am I? Oh, I'm the person that used to like to wear this lipstick. Oh, I'm the person that loved this kind of music. And I think that is a really kind of beautiful thing to be embracing. And it's a great deal of fun and often full of energy as well. And I think it is a similar thing, but as opposed to going away from what you were, I think there's a sense of going back to what you once were to almost find, I don't know, original you. A core you that is the you were before that you can embrace in the future you or the you of now. I don't know, I'm going all over the place with this, but I think there's something really special about it as a form of reinvention.
No, I'm absolutely loving it, and I've got a lot of I've attracted a lot of like-minded friends who are going through divorces, and everybody seems to be experiencing the same thing. Like, it's nice to have somebody sort of going through a similar-ish situation to you that you can, you know, have a moan if something's going particularly wrong, but also like to talk about the once you start dating again and all those kind of, and it really does feel like being a teenager again. It's so yeah, I can totally see why I've gone back to my love of all the things we used to love when we were teenagers, crystals and incense sticks and floaty clothes.
Yeah.
So no, it's, so I suppose, yeah, reinvention can be a thing that's forced upon you. But generally, I see it as a really positive thing, apart from when you're forced to do it because of the like Ruby Wax situation where she or maybe, you know, if it's a divorce that wasn't your choice, I suppose that's another difficult one to approach. But
isn't it our superpower? You know, wasn't that Ruby Wax's superpower? Okay, well, what? They're taking me off the telly. They're not going to allow me to do the thing I've been doing bloody brilliantly for the last X amount of years. Well, screw you. I don't have to do that. I can be any number of people that I choose to be. What was the person that I most wanted to be that I decided not to be 20 years ago? Let's do that instead. Now, I really think there's something enormously powerful. I think it's a real gift that we have, and it's a gift that says nobody needs to remain trapped. There's something really you know, that there's so much damage created by those toxic narratives we carry about ourselves that we repeat to ourselves. And I think the joy of reinvention is saying, yeah, all right, maybe that's what I thought 10 years ago, 5 years ago, half an hour ago, but I don't need to think that actually. And I can change that narrative, and I can be a new narrative. I can be the author of my own life. And I think that's really empowering and probably very necessary in a world where your job can be whipped away from you because you happen to be 50 and female.
Yeah.
I mean, and look at some of the women that, you know, who do you think of classically when you think of somebody who's reinvented themselves? I mean, Madonna is surely the iconic images of somebody who just says, you know, no one thing's going to define me here. Look, I can be any of these women, and I can keep doing that. And look how condemned she is for it as well. What? You're not just going to be this model of womanhood that we expect you to be? You changing again? Well, you can't keep doing that. Well, yeah, I can actually. Watch me.
Yeah. So so it's almost like the fuck you, I can do what I want. Yeah. So I say bring it on, embrace reinvention, and yeah, I like what you say about running away, because I've always talked about the fact that I run away from difficult things, but I haven't run away now. I'm still in Nebworth in Hertfordshire. I might have discussed many a time about selling my house and moving somewhere else, but I haven't done it, and I'm not going to do it in the foreseeable future. One day we'll live by the sea. One
One
day.
day we will. Can I just put a very quick last question in, which is, why do you think reinvention is more a female thing than a male thing?
So most of the men I know from the professional world, this is still very old-fashioned beliefs that are still present in the world now, that the man is the one with the career where not much sort of can interfere with it. And this, I know times are changing, but they're really not changing that much. Still, there's still a huge gender pay gap. There's still a huge gender pension gap. Men are still the ones working full-time. The women are the ones working flexibly or part-time. Lots of people out there campaigning to change it. Great what you're doing, but it's still a huge issue. And I read an interesting article the other day, which was specifically talking about pay gaps and pension gaps. But if you look at how the gap has narrowed, it's going to take another 62 years at that rate before we are at pay parity with our male colleagues. So, we're still donkey's years away from this being, and men don't have to reinvent themselves because they just stay in that corporate job or whatever, the full-time job, working the 9 to 5 from the age of 20 up to 65. And that is still the norm for most of the UK population. And it just seems to be the women who have to change their lifestyles and their working patterns to react to the lives that is going on in their family, be that children or looking after older relatives or whatever. So there's just huge steps of things that still need to happen. But I find it so frustrating because, like, we've been banging on about this. Well, we've been banging on about it for the past sort of 25 years, but the generation before us in the 60s and the 70s was banging on about it as well. And I don't know, sometimes it just feels like we can just keep banging the drum, and we're still not at parity, and we ain't going to be at parity for the next generation or the generation beyond that. So, like, Amy is going to grow up, most likely, hopefully not, but earning less than Abe.
Yes. Well, this is
not
what
if you can help it, but
this is what we're here to change, right? That's the point. That's what we're here doing, having these conversations, raising consciousness and raising awareness. I think in an unusual step for me, because I don't normally do this, but I really think with something like reinvention, I think that would be so powerful for men, for the male half of the species, for men identifying people, to really embrace this idea of reinvention. I think actually the rigidity within patriarchal structures is part of the problem and part of the challenge that we face, and part of our ability to reinvent ourselves. Absolutely, I believe is a superpower, but I also suspect it is a symptom. It has come about because we have to reinvent ourselves in order to change and be malleable to whatever the age and stage where we're at requires, because there isn't this sameness that can run throughout our lives as women often, because of all the things you've mentioned and the caring responsibilities, etc. But I think if men could really kind of have a go at it, like just go crazy and reinvent themselves. The only time that we ever really sort of see an attempt at that is the old midlife crisis that everybody laughs about. That, but actually, I think that's a great shame. Carl Jung talks about midlife as a really critical transition period in adulthood, and he thinks, whereas Freud was kind of like everything's over and done with by the time you're 7, you're completely set as an identity and a personality. Jungian theory is much nicer, I think, in that it says, well, we keep changing and developing, and actually there's a critical point when we do reach midlife where there's a real opportunity to expand and change and transform. And I think, yeah, men of the world who aren't listening to us talk right now, go forward and reinvent yourself in some way, shape or form. You will absolutely, your joie de vivre, your love of life will be hugely benefited by it. And all the people around you will take the mick, but they'll be secretly very jealous that you've become a different you.
Yeah, I get a lot of people say to me, like, I can't believe you were able to walk away from the corporate world and set up your own business and make it a successful business. People who knew me from the corporate world in particular, who now sort of follow my journeys with interest. It's the best thing ever to walk away from a career and start a new one.
100%.
Yeah.
Cool. We done?
We done.
I think we are. All right, brilliant. Well, thank you very much. You have been listening to Mrs. Mummypenny Talks with Ridley Wrights. The podcast music was created, composed and performed by Daniel Greensmith. The podcast and the YouTube video is produced by Lynn Beattie, and we are your hosts, Rebecca Megson-Smith and Lynn Beattie. Thank you so much for being with us again this week, and we will be talking to you again really soon. Have a great week. Take care.
Thanks for watching or listening.
Bye.
Bye.